And you know what happiness is? Happiness is the smell of a new car. It's freedom from fear. It's a billboard on the side of the road that screams with reassurance that whatever you're doing, it's okay. You are okay.
What is up, Mad Men fans? Kino here. Mad Men is a hard show to talk about. On one level, it's a period piece about an advertising agency in the 1960s. On another level, it's a character study of perhaps the most complicated character in all of television history. And on yet another level, it's about identity, consumerism, gender roles, and at its heart, what will make us happy. It's one of the most complicated shows I've ever watched, and even after doing this retrospective, I'm still not sure if I fully understand everything the show has to say. But we're going to go through it together, and hopefully learn the meaning of happiness along the way. Now, if you've seen my 4-hour-long Wire retrospective, then you're probably familiar with this format. But if this is your first time, then let me explain the video. I'll be analyzing the entirety of Mad Men, including the characters, themes, and some behind-the-scenes details. Each of the main characters will have their own dedicated section of the video, as well as sections dedicated to the pilot of the series, the side characters, and the show's creator, Matt Weiner. You can use the timestamps below to jump around, or to find your place again if needed. This video is about half the length of the Wire retrospective, but even still, I'm sure I'm going to get some people commenting about the length. Long-form analysis is a genre here on YouTube, and one that I'm a big fan of. I like taking the time to really dive in depth on a topic, as that's when you can truly start to understand your subject matter. Mad Men is like a novel, a dense, sometimes almost incomprehensibly subtle novel, but like any novel, the story only becomes clear once you have the whole thing. There would be no point in breaking down the series episode by episode, because, like another great show, all the pieces matter.
Wire.
As with all my long-form retrospectives, I edit the video to primarily be an auditory experience. There will be relevant visuals on screen, however, you can put this video on in the background while you do other things. I've worked hard to make sure that you'll be able to follow along just from listening. Unlike my Wire retrospective, I didn't include a breakdown of each of the seasons of the show. This is because Mad Men isn't really a show that has a plot. It's not a show where people are murdered or where each episode ends on a cliffhanger. Some people might even go so far as to say that it's a boring show where nothing ever happens.
Listen, did I catch you at a good time, or are you and the critics busy sucking each other's butts?
Excuse me?
Look, your show is really boring.
I wouldn't go that far, but I will agree that a plot recap of Mad Men would be pointless, which is why I didn't do it. The plot, limited as it is there to serve the characters, and that is the lens through which I'll be analyzing the series. But without further ado, let's get into this retrospective. This is Mad Men.
But everybody else's tobacco's toasted.
No, everybody else's tobacco is poisonous. Lucky Strikes is toasted.
It's fitting that we start this retrospective off with the pilot. Not only because it's the introduction of the series, but also because of the backstory of the pilot script itself. For those who don't know, series creator Matt Weiner wrote the pilot 7 years before the series got picked up. It's what got him the job on The Sopranos, as David Chase was impressed with the writing. He actually recommended to HBO that they make Mad Men as a series once The Sopranos had finished, though for reasons we'll get into later in the video, that didn't end up happening.
It got me my job on The Sopranos about 2 years later, and that literally within a month, days of being there, David Chase sent it to HBO with a note on the top of it that said, "This should be your show after The Sopranos is over." And that was the last I heard from HBO.
Instead, the pilot was picked up by AMC, which at the time had never made an original scripted series. Their programming consisted of old films like Turner Classic Movies. However, they were considered a lower-class version of TCM, as they couldn't afford to license the best films, and would even later start adding in commercials, further hurting their credibility. Along with the threat of streaming, AMC decided that they needed original programming in order to survive. They had experimented with some reality shows, interviews, and documentaries already. Their first real success was Broken Trail, a Western miniseries starring Robert Duvall. Even though it's really a feature film that was split into 2 episodes, the series won 4 Emmys and solidified AMC's desire to produce more critically acclaimed content and draw attention to their network. All of this is to say that AMC wasn't anyone's first choice of a network. They were an unknown entity, and Mad Men only ended up there because no other network was interested. However, this ended up being a blessing in disguise. Since AMC had no experience in creating original series, Matt Weiner was able to pretty much do the show exactly as he wanted.
The network had never made a show before. Basically, there was a power vacuum. And I sucked up all the power because I realized that, I kind of knew how I wanted to do it.
Before we get into the episode itself, we should briefly talk about the title sequence. Set to A Beautiful Mind by RJD2, the intro shows a businessman in silhouette falling, surrounded by skyscrapers featuring advertisements from the period. The theme is pretty obvious even if you know nothing about the show, creating an ominous tone and linking consumerism and advertising with downfall. Whether that downfall is literal or metaphorical, we'll have to see. The title sequence is inspired by the intro of North by Northwest, as well as the Falling Man poster for Vertigo. Weiner has stated that Hitchcock was a big influence on the series and his writing. The silhouette always reminded me of Alfred Hitchcock Presents as well. After the title, we get a text explaining the name Mad Men. Apparently it refers to advertising men who work on Madison Avenue, and the fact that they invented the term for themselves is of course a statement about Don's invented identity, which we'll explore later. I've actually read that the term was never really used in real life, and the fact that they never actually say Mad Men in the show hints that this is here probably more for thematic reasons than actually being a historically accurate term that they used. The pilot episode is called Smoke Gets in Your Eyes. It opens with our lead, Don Draper, at a bar, working on an ad for cigarettes. He engages a black waiter to get his thoughts on cigarettes, and we see that Don's methods involve studying people and their behaviors. Don then goes to see his girlfriend Midge, an artist living in the village. He complains to her about the fact that he has no idea what to do about the fact that cigarettes are now being linked with cancer. Though he doesn't get an idea from her, they do sleep together. The next day we're introduced to the staff at Sterling Cooper, the advertising agency where all the characters work at. Peggy Olson is the new girl at work, starting as a secretary for Don. She's shown around by Joan Holloway, the voluptuous office manager who knows how everything works in the business. She emphasizes that Peggy's job is not only to be a support for Dawn, but also to be beautiful to hopefully find a man to provide for her, a statement about women's situations at the time. We're also introduced to Pete Campbell, a hotshot account executive at Sterling Cooper. Though about to get married, he's eager to sleep with every girl he can. This includes Peggy, who catches his eye immediately. Don warns him that if he continues with his behavior, he'll never get anywhere because no one will ever like him. After this, they meet with Rachel Menken, the daughter of the owner of Menken's department store. She wants him to help make Menken's a luxury brand. Don gets upset when Rachel criticizes his outdated strategy and storms out, much to his boss Roger's chagrin. At the next meeting, they present to Lucky Strike cigarettes, their biggest account. They are concerned that the government's regulation of cigarettes will hurt their business. Don has no ideas, so Pete steps in and suggests that they use the public's death wish to advertise, something one of their researchers had suggested to Don earlier. This offends the clients and they're prepared to walk out. However, at that moment, Don gets an idea. With health claims about cigarettes being outlawed, they have the opportunity to create an entirely new campaign. He comes up with a new idea right on the spot.
And so, gentlemen, in baseball, 3 strikes and you're out. But 3 lucky strikes, and you're in.
Just kidding. He actually comes up with the idea for It's Toasted, saying that advertising is about creating a feeling of happiness in the consumer. Though successful, Don is mad that Pete took the research from his trash and tried to one-up him in the meeting. He admonishes Peggy for allowing him in his office and for flirting with him, but says that they'll get a fresh start tomorrow. He then goes to meet with Rachel Menken for a drink, trying to patch things up from his earlier outburst. They discuss love, with Don cynically stating that romantic love is just an invention to sell products. However, Rachel sees through his attitude, saying that despite what he says, Don is an outsider just like her. At the same time, the guys gather for Pete's bachelor party. He comes on way too strong to one of the girls there who rejects him, and this, along with Don's criticisms, have him feeling down. He then shows up drunk to Peggy's apartment, and they end up sleeping together. At the end of the episode, Don takes a train out of the city to his home in Ossining. There we're introduced to his wife, Betty, and his 2 children, and we realize that there's a whole other side to Don that we didn't realize before. Overall, I think Smoke Gets in Your Eyes is one of the stronger pilots I've seen. The background of how Matt Weiner worked for years to get it made is almost legendary by this point. And there are a lot of hints in this episode for what the series will be about. We see Don's purple heart that he won in Korea, though very thematically, the heart has fallen out of the box when he picks it up. We also hear the faint noise of bombs when Don is napping, again hinting at his backstory. The title of the episode is, as far as I can tell, based on the song of the same name from the musical Roberta. The song doesn't appear in the episode itself, but it's about love and pain, which is very thematic to the series. The episode also shares the name with an episode of Homicide, Life in the Street. I'm not going to do any kind of Easter egg or reference section for this retrospective, because Mad Men is so full of historical references and details that I would just never be able to catch them all. However, I will point out that the picture that Pete has of his fiancée is not the Trudy that we know from the series. It's actually Matt Weiner's mother, as the pilot was filmed almost a year before the show got picked up, and they had not cast Alison Brie yet. The same thing is true of Sally. I don't think this is Kiernan Shipka, as she's not credited on IMDb or in the credits of the episode. The It's Toasted ad is a real one used by Lucky Strike. However, they actually started using it all the way back in 1917, a little bit before Don's time. The episode was directed by Alan Taylor, with cinematography done by Phil Abraham, both of whom had worked on The Sopranos with Matt. In fact, most of the people who worked on this episode had previously worked on The Sopranos, as principal photography was filmed at Silvercup Studios, the same studios where Sopranos was filmed at. But now it's time to get into the characters, starting with everyone's favorite madman, Donald Draper.
You got your whole life ahead of you. Forget that boy in the box. Let me buy a soldier a drink.
Don Draper is the main character of Mad Men. The suave and charming creative director of Sterling Cooper, Don is essentially the ideal picture of success and masculinity in 1960s America. He's a self-made man, rich, tall, handsome, with a beautiful wife and 2 wonderful children living in the suburbs. But underneath this facade, we come to see a deeply vulnerable man, broken by past tragedies and the times that he lives in. Don Draper's story is the core of Mad Men, literally in the sense that he's our main character. But deeper than that, the themes that his storyline gets at are the central ideas that the story grapples with: identity, advertisement, and what will make us happy. He is the most complicated and well-written character in all of television, and I'll only be scratching the surface of him in this review. However, in order to understand Don at all, we need to understand the truth about who he is.
Who is Don Draper?
Don was born Dick Whitman, the son of a poor Illinois farmer and a prostitute who died giving birth to him. While some people think the name Whitman is a reference to the poet Walt Whitman, Matt Weiner has stated that it's actually meant to sound like white man, referencing Don's role as an archetypal American. Funny enough though, his first name Dick is after the part of his father that his mother wanted to cut off for getting her pregnant.
His name is Dick. After a wish his mother should have lived to see.
Dick was given to his father Archibald and his wife Abigail to raise. Growing up on the farm was rough on Dick. His father was a drunk, and they had very little to get by. When his father was killed after being kicked in the head by a horse, Dick was left to be raised alone by his abusive stepmother, who constantly reminded him that he was the bastard son of a whore.
Ain't you heard? I'm a whore child.
After Arch died, Abigail took up with a man named Mac, who ran a whorehouse in Philadelphia. While he was living there, he lost his virginity to an older prostitute who took advantage of him. When his stepmother learned about this, she viciously beat him. This would have a profound effect on the way that Dick viewed sexuality in the future. In order to get away, when Dick was 18, he volunteered to serve in the Korean War. There he was assigned to work under a man named Donald Draper, building a field hospital. One day they were attacked by the North Koreans. Though not injured, the attack caused a fuel leak, which Dick accidentally ignited with his lighter. Don was killed in the explosion, and Dick switched their dog tags, assuming his identity. He did this not only so that he could leave Korea, but also so that he could abandon his old identity and all the emotional baggage that came with it.
I found out it was easier to be him than to start over.
Now a decorated war hero, he left his old life behind and began a new start as Donald Draper. He started working as a salesman at various businesses, using the confidence of his new identity to succeed. However, he was eventually tracked down by Anna Draper, the wife of the real Don. Though shocked to learn about her husband's death, she eventually comes to love Dick as a brother. She becomes the only person left who knows who he truly is, and accepts him despite that. Eventually, Don got an opportunity to work at Sterling Cooper after running into Roger Sterling and tricking him into hiring him. Don worked his way up from a copywriter into eventually becoming the creative director of the agency. He also met and married Betty Hofstadt, a beautiful young model. They eventually moved out to the suburbs of New York and had 2 children, Sally and Bobby.
I remember Mona said they looked like they were on top of our wedding cake. Screw him.
On the surface, Don represents the American dream. He's a self-made man, literally reinventing himself into the picture of success in 1950s America. His life is seemingly perfect, having achieved everything a man in his time strived for. Professional and financial success, a beautiful wife, and a picturesque family in the suburbs. However, underneath the surface, Don is deeply unsatisfied. His life is fraught with fear that his secret will one day be found out. He goes to incredible paranoid lengths to make sure that he can never be discovered. This fear isn't just about the legal consequences of being punished as a deserter, but more that he'll be revealed as a fraud and the world will see him as he truly is. Don believes that everything he has achieved is due to his perfect persona, and that the real Dick Whitman doesn't deserve any of this. He knows that his new life is based on a lie. Don strives to be an insider, to fit into the world of success, but can't ever truly shake the feeling that he doesn't belong there. The confidence of Don Draper is a front that he puts on to hide from the world, while underneath, he's still the same poor farm boy from Illinois.
What would you do if you were me? Would you love you?
I was surprised that you ever loved me.
But keeping up the lie is exhausting and isolating. He not only has to hide his past, but he can never let anyone get close to him, not even his family, for fear that they might see past the facade. Despite being surrounded by people who love him, Don feels alone, because who they love isn't really him. The only one who truly knew and loved him was Anna, which is why her death broke him so much.
Somebody very important to me died. The only person in the world who really knew me.
Thus, Don is a deeply unhappy man. Despite having everything, Don is constantly trying to throw it all away. His drinking, his affairs, and his need to keep everyone at a distance are all in an attempt to destroy the Don Draper persona that's slowly killing him from the inside.
I'm tired of running.
Over the course of the series, this death wish manifests itself more and more, to the point where it eventually can't be contained. He loses his family over his lies and neglect. His work suffers from his alcoholism, and even his creativity begins to reflect the macabre nature of his psyche. He can't stand to lie about himself anymore, but when he tries to be honest, he's punished for it. People don't want Dick Whitman the man. They want Don Draper the perfect figure.
People tell you who they are, but we ignore it. Because we want them to be who we want them to be.
Don is considered a marketing genius, and the secret of that is the fact that he can relate to the pain and struggle that everyone grapples with. He understands what it's like to be constantly searching for something meaningful, and his ads use these emotions in order to sell products.
You are the product. You feeling something. That's what sells.
However, there's also a deep irony to Don's role as a creative director. Just like his advertisements, Don's identity is an invention. It's a beautiful lie, meant to hide the faults and present the most idealized and seductive parts of himself. And while Don's whole job is to sell happiness, he himself doesn't even know what that means.
And you know what happiness is? Happiness, it's a billboard on the side of the road that screams with reassurance that whatever you're doing, it's okay. But what is happiness? It's a moment before you need more happiness.
For his entire life, Don's search for happiness was external. He sought out a new identity when his old one was too painful to deal with. He sought out the material success of the 1960s, a house in suburbia, an expensive car, and all the things that advertisements like the ones he makes said would make him happy. However, none of it was enough to fill the hole inside of himself.
Oh, I think it's broken.
You can hear that?
Part of this is because the realities of success are not all that Don imagined they would be. The beautiful world of the rich and glamorous feels hollow and meaningless once you're actually inside. He talks about this with Conrad Hilton, another outsider who, like Don, grew up poor before finding out that life in the mansion is not all that it's cracked up to be.
But somehow, no matter how expensive my cufflinks, I feel like I've got the head of a jackass.
However, the real reason why Don was never able to find happiness is because he never truly dealt with his problems. Don's motto throughout the series is to move forward and never look back, meaning don't dwell on the past, but rather look to the future at all costs.
This never happened. It will shock you how much it never happened.
This ideology is meant to reflect the stoicism and perseverance valued in American society, just like Tony Soprano praising the strong silent type. However, just like with Tony, it becomes clear that this attitude is not a strength, but rather a weakness of Don's. He's not moving forward with his life, he's running away from his problems.
You don't want to run away with me, you just want to run away. You're a coward.
Because he never deals with his past traumas, he's never able to heal from them. And even when he covers them up with the facade of confidence and success that is Don Draper, the wounds are still there and manifest in his life in negative ways, like his drinking and his serial cheating. This is why the final episode is so important. Don has left everything behind, his work, his friends, his family, all in an attempt to find himself. But there's nothing to find. Don Draper doesn't exist. He's still searching for something external, and his search takes him from literally one end of the continent to the other before he's finally forced to confront the reality of his life.
Took another man's name and made nothing of it.
It's in this New Age hippie retreat that he's forced to examine himself. He learns that he needs to deal with his pain instead of running away from it. And he realizes the truth about what happiness is. It's not material wealth or success, or even escaping your problems. It's about human connection, the very thing he's been trying to imitate with his advertisements all this time. In the final seconds of the series, Don meditates and transcends into a mental and spiritual revelation about humanity, and how all of us, no matter our backgrounds, are searching for the same thing: love and acceptance. And then he sells that idea to Coca-Cola. Seriously, the ending of the series implies that Don came up with the famous "Buy the World a Coke" commercial while meditating on that hill. The commercial was one of the most groundbreaking advertisements of all time, promoting a message of love and hope, and portraying a diverse and multicultural group of people from around the world living together in harmony. In real life, the ad was developed by McCann Erickson, the company that Don works for at the end of the series. This suggests that Don returned to McCann after the finale and continued to work in advertising.
McCann will take you back in a second. Apparently it's happened before. Don't you want to work on Coke?
The message of this finale and the entire show depends on how you view advertising. If you read it cynically, you can say that Don took the insights he obtained about humanity and love and happiness and used it to sell sugar water to the masses. Or you could say that Don used capitalism and consumerism to bring a message of peace and love to the world. Like a good novel, the series leaves it open to you on which you believe.
It means the only thing keeping you from being happy is the belief that you are alone.
We're not done analyzing Donald Draper. Even with this entire retrospective, I doubt I could ever fully analyze every facet of the man. He is the most complicated character ever written for television. Yes, even more than Tony Soprano. And we'll be talking about him more in other sections, as the stories of the other characters also reflect back on Don. But for now, let's move on and talk about Don's protege, Peggy Olson.
Who are you?
I'm Peggy Olson, the new girl.
Peggy Olson is the female lead of the series. She starts out as a secretary in the first season, but goes on to become a copywriter and eventually one of the most important people at Sterling Cooper. Her story is about feminism, with her meteoric rise meant to reflect the new world for women opening up in the 1960s. But as we'll see, it's a long, difficult road to the top.
I'd like to be the first woman creative director at this agency. That's funny to you?
No, I'm impressed that you know exactly.
And what else is there?
Peggy is introduced in the pilot as the new girl at Sterling Cooper. She's assigned to be Don's new secretary, a position she went to school for. However, she's also a Brooklyn-raised Catholic girl, unfamiliar with the more complicated world of Manhattan. She's a fish out of water, just like the audience. And as the experienced Joan Holloway shows her around on her first day, so too are we introduced to the world of Mad Men.
This job is odd, but it's the best.
At the time, the attitude of women in the workplace was going through a cultural shift. It was now acceptable for women to work and even live on their own. However, work was still seen as a stepping stone for getting married, the ultimate goal every woman should still be aspiring to. And as you would expect of a 1960s workplace, Peggy has to endure sexism and harassment on a level that rises to cartoonish.
And remember, nothing says good job like a firm, open palm slap on the behind.
Originally, Peggy tries to follow the path that Joan lays out for her and looks for a man. She makes a move on Don that he immediately shuts down, and later gives in to Pete's advances, even becoming pregnant from one of their encounters. However, she realizes that he's just using her for his own physical and emotional needs, and that she needs to look elsewhere for her fulfillment.
I could have had you. I could have shamed you into being with me. But I didn't want to.
Eventually, Peggy quickly proves that she's more than just a pretty face. She has a unique insight into their Belle Jolie account, and is given a job writing copy on the side. After working hard and proving herself, she's eventually promoted to a full copywriter, the first woman to do so at the company since the war.
I'm the first girl to do any writing in this office. Since the war. Marge told me.
As the series goes on, Peggy continues to prove she's the most talented of all of Don's team. She has slew after slew of incredible ideas, with the work ethic to back it up. Don takes her under his wing, acting as a mentor to her. He gives her advice and guidance, not only with ad work, but also with life. When he later forms his own agency, he only wants her out of all of his writers to follow him to this new venture.
What if I say no? You'll never speak to me again.
No. I will spend the rest of my life trying to hire you.
The reason Don takes such an interest in Peggy is not just her skill as a creative, it's that he sees himself in her. Like Don, Peggy is an outsider in the Mad Men world. Like Don, she too has a tragedy that she has to move past. In her case, her surprise pregnancy and giving up the baby. And this shared pain results in them having a father and daughter-like relationship.
Welcome back, Daddy.
Is that a question?
What did you bring me, Daddy?
And like a child to their parent, Peggy tries to be like Don. She tries to model herself after him, not only as a creative, but also how he conducts himself as a leader. Though she can see the flaws in him, unlike so many other characters, she still admires what he's managed to create for himself, and aspires to be the same self-made person that he is.
I look at you and I think, I want what he has.
Really?
You have everything. And so much of it.
However, this relationship is not always pleasant. Like his actual children, Don can be neglectful and borderline abusive to Peggy. He views her as an extension of himself, and thus doesn't always see her as her own person. He has a tendency to take her for granted, thinking that she owes everything to him for taking a chance on her in the first place.
Everyone thinks you do all my work. Even you.
What's even more funny is that despite Don taking credit for seeing something in Peggy and promoting her, we should remember that he originally only did so to get back at Pete for revealing his identity to Bert. Though he does come to respect her for her abilities, he's not exactly the benign benefactor that he makes himself out to be.
Everything to you is an opportunity. And you should be thanking me every morning when you wake up, along with Jesus, for giving you another day.
Eventually, like any child, Peggy has to leave the house and go off on her own. After learning all she could from Don, Peggy eventually leaves to join CGC, a firm led by Don's chief rival, Ted Chaw. She even sleeps with Ted, which is the third example of her sleeping with guys that he hates, along with Pete and Duck Phillips. It's like a child rebelling against their parents and hooking up with, literally in her case, the bad boy that they hate.
Well, good for you. Where are you going?
Cutler, Gleason, and Shaw.
Perfect.
However, Peggy doesn't get to enjoy her newfound freedom for long. Sterling Cooper and CGC eventually merge, bringing her back under Don's thumb. Her relationship with Ted falls apart too, as he chooses to abandon her to focus on his family. Even after coming so far in her career, she still lacks the agency to fully control her fate.
Someday you'll be glad I made this decision.
Well, aren't you lucky to have decisions?
However, the ending of the series makes it clear that Peggy's on the rise. After Sterling Cooper and Partners is bought out by McCann, Peggy is given a senior copywriter job. It's clear that after spending a few years grinding at the largest advertising agency in the world, along with her other accomplishments, she'll be one of the first female creative directors in the world. Her literal dream come true.
Hell, you're doing fine. Keep it up, you'll be a creative director by 1980.
God, that sounds like a long time.
I'm telling you, it will happen. They just have to get used to the idea. Someday, people are going to brag that they worked with you.
Overall, Peggy's story is about women's new role in society that was emerging in the 1960s. She represents the first wave of women to focus on their careers instead of raising children, and her rise to the top of the advertising business is a reflection of the vast opportunities opening up for women in the world. Peggy is without a doubt a feminist icon, and one of the most well-written examples of that.
I have a job. I have my own office with my name on the door. And I have a secretary. That's you. And I am not scared of any of this.
However, that's not to say that her storyline is perfect. Peggy's ending always felt incongruous with the rest of the series for me. We're told over and over again that money and your career aren't what will make you happy, but rather love and human connection. It's strange then that Peggy is rewarded for focusing on her career to the detriment of all her other relationships.
I mean, I know what I'm supposed to want, but it just never feels right. Or as important as anything in that office.
She loses her connection to both her family and her many boyfriends over the series by not treating them like they're important, just like Dawn does. But instead of being punished for it and ending up alone like he does, she ends up finding love and getting a happy ending in the final montage.
I'm in love with you.
What?
I love you, Peggy.
And this isn't an argument against Stan. I like Peggy and Stan. I think they're cute together. But it's just odd that the moment comes out of nowhere, rather than Peggy having to learn a lesson or change in order to make the relationship work. Stan is even the one who tells her that he loves her first, robbing her of the agency to make that choice herself. Again, an odd decision given that her storyline was all about trying to empower herself to get the things that she wants.
I mean, it must be. Because you're always right. I can't believe this. I think I'm in love with you too.
Now, I understand the feminist angle of her story, and it probably would have been a bad look for the show to be encouraging women to focus on their families over their careers. But I just think that Peggy's story doesn't have a satisfactory ending because it avoided addressing the real thematic issues of the show.
You spend your whole life thinking you're not getting it. People aren't giving it to you. Then you realize they're trying. And you don't even know what it is.
But setting that aside, Peggy is still an incredibly well-written character. Competent, driven, and beautifully flawed, Peggy is one of the central pillars of the show, and watching her go from a naive young secretary to a badass copywriter was one of the best and most empowering parts of Mad Men.
Peggy, can you get me some coffee?
No.
And then he realized everything he already had was not right either. And that was why it had happened at all. And that his life with his family was some temporary bandage on a permanent wound.
It's hard to imagine a more unlikable character than Pete Campbell. At the start of the series, Pete is a smug, spoiled weakling. His entitlement and his obnoxious attitude, along with him reeking of desperation, results in pretty much everyone at Sterling Cooper disliking the guy.
You'll die in that corner office, a mid-level executive with a little bit of hair who women go home with out of pity. Want to know why? Because no one will like you.
However, over the course of the show, we start to see a different side of Pete. We see the pain in his soul, and as the series goes on, he gradually lets go of his insecurities and becomes a hard-working and respectable man. Compared to Don or Peggy, Pete is not one of the more glamorous characters. Actor Vincent Kartheiser was never nominated for any awards for his performance, which is an absolute travesty. Because despite not being as flashy or as sexy as the other storylines, Pete's story is one of the deepest and most relatable journeys in the series.
How are you? Not great, Bob.
Pete Campbell is a young account manager at Sterling Cooper. He's from the prestigious Campbell-Dykeman family, which was once one of the richest in New York. Though they have lost a lot of their wealth over time, the name Campbell is still enough to land him a job at Sterling Cooper, and is the only reason they keep him around at first.
Don't fool yourself. There's a Pete Campbell at every agency out there.
Well, let's get one of the other ones.
In the first season, Pete embodies the worst aspects of the Mad Men world. He's full of himself despite accomplishing so little. He feels entitled to everything despite not earning anything on his own. And of course, he sexually harasses every woman around him.
Wouldn't be a sin for us to see your legs. And if you pull your waist in a little bit, you might look like a woman.
Is that all, Mr. Draper?
Hey, I'm not done here. I'm working my way up.
Pete aspires to be like Don. Despite being in accounts, he wants to be a creative like him, and he tries to emulate Don's seduction of women. However, unlike Don, who manages to be suave and charming, Pete just comes off as cloying and desperate. People are turned off by Pete, not just because he doesn't look like Don, but because he comes off as way too eager.
He basically said I care too much about my clients and they notice it. How could that be bad?
We eventually learn why Pete is like this. His family always looked down on Pete, seeing him as a failure to live up to their name. Despite providing him with every opportunity, they never gave him the one thing he always wanted, acceptance. This is the permanent wound that he talks about. Growing up this way left Pete with a chip on his shoulder, and he's desperate for validation in any form in order to try and bandage that wound.
Why is it so hard for you people to give me anything?
We gave you everything. We gave you your name. And what have you done with it?
Thus, Pete seeks things to make himself feel important and respected. He has a string of affairs because it makes him feel wanted. He tries to be a writer, not because he's passionate about it, but because he wants Dawn's approval as a father figure. When Ken gets a story published in The Atlantic, Pete pushes his wife Trudy to sleep with her ex-boyfriend so that he can get published as well, because he craves the external validation that much.
I could have gotten you in the New Yorker, or in the Encyclopedia Britannica if I wanted to.
So, why didn't you?
And it's not just external things like money or success. Pete craves love and acceptance from the people around him, and is continually disappointed that no one gives it to him. When he fights Lane, he's not just hurt from the fight itself. He's hurt because he was hoping that one of his coworkers, whom he's worked with for years, would step in and stand up for him.
What was I supposed to do? Step in? Punch Lane?
Why are we even having a fight at work? This is an office. We're supposed to be friends.
It's one of the reasons he gravitates towards Peggy in the first season. She's young and naive, and he can come to her in his lowest moments, and she accepts him. When she starts to become accepted and loved by everyone else, Pete hates it, not just because she's no longer at his beck and call, but also because she's getting the very thing that he desperately wants.
And every time I walk by, I wonder, are you going to be nice to me? Or cruel?
It's ironic, of course, because Pete does have love and acceptance. He's married to Trudy, who is literally the perfect wife. She genuinely loves Pete, despite all of his flaws, and she's endlessly positive and supportive of him. In fact, I think she's too perfect. Trudy basically has no faults. The most you can say is that she's a little bossy sometimes, but that's it. She's basically the perfect wife, and it makes Pete even more unsympathetic that he had such a perfect home life and didn't even appreciate it until the end of the series.
I have nothing done.
Now, you could say that's intentional. Many of the guys like Dawn in the series don't appreciate their wives or families until it's too late. But other wives like Betty or Megan actually had flaws that made them interesting characters. Trudy is just sweet and perfect and honestly a little flat as a character. Now, I think there are a couple of reasons for this. One is that Matt Weiner based the character on his grandmother and might have been idealizing her to some extent. The other reason is that actress Alison Brie was working on Community at the same time as Mad Men. This meant that she wasn't as available as they might have liked. Maybe if they could have, they would have given Trudy more storylines that would have fleshed her out more. But if Trudy's character had to suffer for the sake of Annie Edison, then that's a trade I'm willing to make.
Abed, what are you doing?
Don Draper from Mad Men. What'd you think?
Weird.
Awesome. Put your tongue in her ear.
I liked it. Don't be him. He cheats on his wife.
That's not to say that Pete has no likable qualities. He's one of the first to recognize new trends, not only in business, but also in the world. Perhaps because of his youth, he's one of the most progressive characters on the show. He's a supporter of JFK and Martin Luther King, and their deaths personally affected him. He genuinely believes in the civil rights movement, and actively pushes back on racism.
Did you know we were in the presence of a bona fide racist?
That's the latest thing, isn't it? Everybody's a racist!
Over the course of the show, Pete does grow into a better person. He works hard and becomes one of the most critical parts of Sterling Cooper. He stops acting like a dickhead all the time, and eventually his co-workers do start to like him. And he realizes what he had all along with his family, and is able to work things out and reunite with them. In the series finale, he's finally happy and at peace, moving to a great new job with his wife and daughter by his side.
I want to start over. And I know I can. I'm not so dumb anymore. I'm not ignoring the fact that I could actually lose your love.
However, some fans don't think he deserved that ending. We have to talk about the au pair scene. In the episode Souvenir, Pete meets his neighbor's German au pair, which is essentially a live-in babysitter. Pete replaces a dress that she had stained, and then pressures her into sex to return the favor. Many viewers think that what Pete did to this girl was rape.
I went to a lot of trouble to solve your dress problem. And I think I at least deserve to see it on you.
Now, both Matt Weiner and Vincent Kartheiser have said that the scene was not meant to be interpreted that way. In the script, she was supposed to be more enthusiastic, but they claimed that the actress didn't play it the way that they wanted. However, I find it hard to believe that the scene could be interpreted any other way. Not only does Pete force his way into this girl's room when she already turned him down, she spends the next few days afterwards crying, to the point where Pete's neighbor figures out what's going on. Afterwards, Pete seems ashamed of himself and tells Trudy that he doesn't want to be away from her anymore.
I don't want you to go away anymore without me.
Now, we see all sorts of disgusting behavior from the men on the show, including other examples of sexual assault. It's a part of the social and political era that the show takes place in, but I don't think that was an intended part of Pete's story. Sure, he's a pushy, creepy guy at the beginning of the series, but he's not meant to be a villain. I think this was an example of a script that just didn't translate well when filmed, but it's interesting given Matt Weiner's own experiences that he doesn't understand why people feel the way they do about the scene.
The allegation is not true, and that this is a very important topic, and a topic that I have devoted, that has been an obsession of mine in my work and in my life.
But setting that aside, Pete is one of the most underappreciated characters, both within the narrative and by the fandom. He's not sexy like Dawn, or aspiring like Peggy. He doesn't come across as tortured and sympathetic, but instead whiny and pathetic. But this is exactly what makes him such a relatable character. He's not masked by a facade of charisma the way that Dawn is. He's just a normal guy, desperate for acceptance in a world that isn't giving it to him. He's like Leonard in the final episode, and if we're honest with ourselves, it's a lot closer to how most of us feel compared to someone like Dawn.
Sometimes I think maybe I died, and I'm in some kind of, I don't know if it's heaven or hell or limbo, but I don't seem to exist. No one feels my existence.
Just cash the checks. You're gonna die one day.
If Pete was the most unlikable of the main characters, then Roger is the exact opposite. He is without a doubt the funniest and most charming character in the series. Like Pete, he's also a smug rich asshole, but unlike Pete, he just owns it. It's impossible not to be charmed by this jerk from the first time we meet him.
Do you know how invigorating it is to go in and write a check for $6,500 and not care?
However, Roger's role as the guy with the funny one-liners has led people to really overlook him as a character. Underneath his wit and his flashy appearance, there's a man in deep spiritual crisis. And in this section, we'll explore who Roger is underneath all the jokes.
Jesus, it's like Iwo Jima out there. We should put a rubber mat down so Cooper can get around.
He might lose his foot.
Right when he got it in the door.
Roger Sterling is one of the owners of the Sterling Cooper advertising agency. His father, also named Roger, was one of the founders along with Bert Cooper. After his death, Roger inherited his ownership stake of the business, along with a considerable fortune.
I've acted like I've started a business my whole life, but I inherited it.
Because of his status and his name, Roger doesn't really have to work hard. His only real responsibility is Lucky Strike Cigarettes, the biggest account at Sterling Cooper. However, because cigarettes basically sell themselves, Roger only has to do basic things like take them out to dinner every once in a while, and otherwise is free to coast on their existing success.
I don't know you squat. You inherited this account.
Thus, Roger fills his time with meaningless pursuits. He writes a book about his life as an ad man that no one really wants to read. He goofs around and plays pranks, but he mostly just drinks and gets in the way of other people doing business. It's to the point where, despite being one of the owners of the company, he's not considered an important part of Sterling Cooper.
Mr. Sterling's not on that chart at all.
It's true. Oh, well, that was an oversight.
There's an irony to Roger's status as a successful businessman. Despite being rich and having his name on the door, Roger isn't actually powerful. He does things for the business, of course, but it's really other men like Don and Pete driving the business forward, and it's Bert who reigns over the company as its king. Thus, Roger takes the role of the fool, the funny guy that no one really takes seriously.
Lee Garner Jr. never took you seriously because you never took yourself seriously.
The reason for this is that Roger has never really had to struggle for anything. All his life, he's been guided and taken care of by other people. By his parents, by Bert as a business mentor, and by a series of women. He's been handed his life on a sterling silver platter, and thus never developed a true drive or passion.
I always envied that. The way you were always reaching.
I always envied you didn't have to. In another lifetime, I'd have been your chauffeur.
And you would have been screwing my grandmother.
Mad Men is a show about characters with chips on their shoulders. People who have dark secrets, who long for more than they have. Everyone on the show is dealing with something wrong with them. Everyone but Roger. He's not unsure of himself or where he belongs. He is completely comfortable with who he is.
My generation, we drink because it's good. Because it feels better than unbuttoning your collar. Because we deserve it. We drink because it's what men do.
In addition to being born a member of high society, Roger's also a veteran of World War II. He's part of the greatest generation, and is a participant in what many consider to be the greatest and most morally justified war in human history. Roger is rightly content with himself and his role in society.
Don never talks about the war.
The war? His war, you mean?
Not much to say. You boys used up all the glory.
We did, didn't we?
However, despite having everything, Roger still isn't exactly happy. He drinks heavily, he smokes, he has affairs, and all of this to the point where it nearly kills him. And while he says he does all of this because it's fun, it seems like there's a much deeper issue going on.
I've been living the last 20 years like I'm on shore leave. What the hell is that about?
Roger is the oldest of the main characters, being 10 years older than Dawn. As he grows older, he sees his life slowly fading away. He's not the young buck anymore. Women don't look at him the way they used to. And he sees himself being pushed from his position in the world by younger, more ambitious men.
I'm tired of it, Don. Tired of trying to prove I still have any value around here. I'm exhausted from hanging onto the ledge and having some kid's foot on my fingertips. Bombs away.
It's clear that Roger fears death. Not just his own mortality, but the death of his era. The glory of his younger days are a distant memory. His perfect life with his wife and daughter make him miserable. And he sees his era as a man on top of the world, coming to an end in the fires of the 1960s.
Oh, God. I miss the 50s.
At first, Roger tries to distract himself with material things. He leaves his wife for a young secretary named Jane. However, the excitement from this eventually fades away as well, and Roger is left with another woman he can't stand.
So what was wrong again?
You don't like me.
I did.
This leads him down a road of existentialism.
Fucking internet.
No. It's a European philosophy. After World War II, people were disillusioned by the sheer weight of the horrors. And that's when the whole idea took root that there were no absolute truths.
He starts to question everything around himself and looks for new sources of meaning. During an acid trip, he has vivid hallucinations and sees the truth about his life. It gives him some temporary relief, but that fades away as well, and Roger is left adrift without any sense of direction.
Turns out the experiences are nothing. They're just some pennies pick up off the floor, stick in your pocket, and you're just going in a straight line to you-know-where.
Over the course of the show, Roger explores various cures for his spiritual crisis. He even starts living with a bunch of hippies and engaging in free love. When his daughter Margaret, also going through a spiritual crisis, leaves her family to join a commune, he actually tries to engage with her and the hippies because he too is also looking for something. But ultimately, he rejects the idea of running away from the world.
How could you just leave him? He's your baby.
It's not that hard, Daddy. He'll be fine.
Things only really begin to change for the better when he meets Marie Calvé, Megan's mother. He starts a romance with her, and this time it actually sticks. They end up getting married, and Roger has finally found a woman who can actually push back on him and refuses to continue the trend of people who just take care of him.
Roger, please don't ask me for anything. Please don't ask me to take care of you.
Now, of course, Roger does have another romance in the series, Joan. They even have a child together. We'll talk about that in the next section, but despite it being interesting from the perspective of two main characters hooking up, it's actually not that big a part of the story.
I guess somebody finally got their timing right.
At the end of the series, Roger is in a much better place mentally and spiritually. He's let go of his fear of death and irrelevance and accepted the simple pleasure of being loved by a good woman, and one who can speak French at that.
I tried to get Jane to talk to me in that accent. Nothing doing. She doesn't speak French. Doesn't like me.
It's the end of the flashy madman persona that he represented at the beginning of the series. But it's a beautiful and comforting retirement for the madman who's brought us so much laughter over the years.
You're a real prick, you know that?
Damn it, Bert. You stole my goodbye.
You don't know what it's like to want something your whole life and to plan for it and to count on it and not get it, okay? Oh, shit.
Joan Holloway is the office manager at Sterling Cooper. She runs the secretary pool and handles most of the logistics that keeps the company running. She's one of the most iconic parts of Mad Men. With her sharp intellect and sassy retorts, Joan is considered by many people to be one of the best characters on Mad Men. Sorry, I mean the breast character. 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 Sorry, I mean the... Alright, I know Christina Hendricks doesn't like it when we talk about her looks instead of her acting ability. And jokes aside, we will be talking about more than just Joan's body in this section. But it's important to mention because Christina's physicality is part of why she was cast, and it changed the direction that Matt Weiner took with her character.
And then, you know, Christina came in and read it, and I was like, oh my God. First of all, I want to see these two women walking down the hall next to each other. Second of all, there was just this person there who had an agenda. It wasn't just all of a sudden it was a courtesan, you know? It was like someone just bringing her into, it wasn't just a bunch of jokes about, you know, let me tell you how the office works and this is what it's gonna be and I'm gonna be in charge.
Joan's beauty is her most defining feature, both to the people around her and to herself. Joan prides herself on being attractive and uses her shapely figure and her seductive charm to navigate the world around her.
My mother raised me to be admired.
Joan is a sex symbol, not just to us as the audience, but also for the characters in the show. She's compared to other beautiful women throughout history, like Cleopatra, and of course the obvious similarities to her contemporary, Marilyn Monroe.
Jackie? Marilyn? Well, Marilyn's really a Joan, not the other way around.
Joan represents the generation of women in between Betty and Peggy. Unlike Betty, she works and has casual affairs instead of getting married and raising children. However, her ultimate goal is still to find a man to take care of her. Unlike Peggy, who wants to be a career woman, to Joan, her job is just a stepping stone until she's finally ready to settle down.
In a couple of years, with the right moves, you'll be in the city with the rest of us. Of course, if you really make the right moves, you'll be out in the country and you won't be going to work at all.
Eventually, she achieves this goal. She marries Greg Harris, a handsome doctor who's on track to become a surgeon. On the surface, it seems like the perfect life. However, Greg turns out to be a piece of shit. Not only does he fail to become a surgeon, his insecurities about Joan's sexual history lead him to raping her at the office. However, despite all of this, Joan continues to stay with him to maintain appearances.
Are you ready to go? I don't want to miss our reservation.
No, of course not.
This gets to the heart of Joan's complexity as a character. She comes off so confident and assured about what she wants out of life. It seems like she knows everything and how to get it. But she's consistently wrong. Her life doesn't turn out the way she hoped it would, but even when she realizes that, she continues to sell others on the ideal that is failing her.
She's the most rigid and judgmental and self-confident, but at the same time she's wrong about everything, but she's still sticking to it and she lives by her decisions. And there's a wisdom there, but there's also a kind of there's a cruel reality that keeps smacking her in the face and she keeps ignoring.
Early on in the series, Joan is dismissive of Peggy's desire to achieve professional success in her own right. She continues to believe that she should put her energy into being attractive and finding a man. But as women like Peggy start to rise above her, we see the holes in Joan's philosophy.
Although, sometimes when people get what they want, they realize how limited their goals were.
She's given a job reading scripts and starts to enjoy work beyond just being a secretary, only for it to be taken away from her and given to a man. She's given a title promotion with more responsibilities, but no actual pay increase. And after leaving Sterling Cooper to assume her life as a housewife, Joan realizes that she actually misses the engagement of her professional work.
I just keep thinking about what's going on here, and I missed it too much.
There's a lot of parallels between Joan and Dawn. Both are extremely attractive and confident people who put on a front of success while internally feeling the frustration of failing to live up to their ideal. Their similarity is probably why Joan is the only woman, aside from Peggy, that Dawn has never showed an interest in sexually.
But no flowers from you.
You scared the shit out of me. Bert Peterson told me you were the one person in the agency I shouldn't cross.
Like Dawn, Joan strives for the idealized American life that is sold through advertisements like the ones they create at Sterling Cooper. But just like Dawn, reality does not live up to the ideal. Not only does Joan's marriage fall apart, leaving her a single mother, but she even prostitutes herself in order to secure a partnership at the firm.
You're talking about prostitution.
I'm talking about business at a very high level.
The irony, of course, is that Joan is a very talented woman. She's been keeping Sterling Cooper running for years without any of the appreciation or reward that the men around her get, despite the fact that she works way harder than they do. But again, because Joan is only prized for her appearance and sexuality, that is what ultimately lands her a position of power.
You know what? I'm sorry my accomplishments happened in broad daylight, and I can't be given the same rewards.
But even after she achieves some success, she's still beset by the sexism of her era. There's a reason her prostitution occurs at the same time as Dawn's Jaguar pitch about something beautiful that you can truly own. Because she's beautiful, she's objectified and treated as something to be sexually owned, regardless of her own desires.
What do you do around here besides walking around like you're trying to get raped?
Excuse me?
Even Peggy, a woman who has suffered through her own sexual harassment, still thinks Joan is essentially asking to be mistreated because of her looks.
I don't know. You can't have it both ways. You can't dress the way you do and expect...
How do I dress?
Which, by the way, isn't true. Joan is never shown throughout the series to be dressed provocatively. Matt Weiner actually made a point that Joan would always be covered up at work in outfits that could be worn at church. But again, because of her curvaceous body, she's sexualized even when she does nothing but exist, which says more about the people viewing her than it does about the character.
But my philosophy was unwrapping the package. That was the sex appeal, that there was all of these layers, and then underneath it were Joan's breasts. But she's dressed like a nun. It's form-fitting, and you see it, but she is always wearing something you could wear to church.
After being bought out by McCann Erickson, Joan is forced out of the company after refusing to back down to the harassment of the men around her. She eventually ends up owning her own production company, using both her maiden and married names as the name of the firm. Joan has become her own boss, and like Peggy's story, it's a very feminist and empowering ending for a woman who has gone through so much to get to where she's at.
We won't answer to anyone. It'll be something of ours with our name on it.
However, like Peggy, I also do have problems with her storyline in the final season, namely with her love interest Richard. She meets this guy, they start a relationship, he breaks up with her because she's focusing on her work, he comes back to her and says he accepts her work, and then he breaks up with her again because she starts a new company.
Richard, wait. You're being silly.
Good luck, Joan.
It's just such a weird and inconsequential storyline. I think they wanted to give her a she don't need no man storyline to go with her ending, but it just feels tacked on and pointless. And speaking of pointless romances, we should finally talk about her and Roger.
You are the finest piece of ass I ever had, and I don't care who knows it. I am so glad I got to roam those hillsides.
Joan and Roger have been having an affair since before the series began. In fact, the relationship was what led to Roger finding Dawn in that coat store. But despite the fact that two main characters are sleeping together, the relationship doesn't go anywhere. It's not even suggested that these are star-crossed lovers kept apart by circumstances. It's literally just an affair that kind of fizzles out when both parties move on.
We both know I'll eventually find a more permanent situation, and you'll find a new model.
Again, you would think that this would be a storyline. Joan and Roger in love, or at least passionate about each other. But there's really nothing here. Despite the fact that they sleep together one more time, and even create a life together, the relationship doesn't even attempt to go anywhere.
We made a baby.
Yes. And now it's some other lucky girl's turn.
Now, you could say it's a character reason why they didn't end up together. That perhaps they were too similar, or Roger was too immature or something. But honestly, it feels more like a dropped plot line than an actual meaningful part of the storytelling.
I'm not a solution to your problems. I'm another problem.
And again, it goes back to what I talked about at the beginning. Matt Weiner originally didn't have a storyline planned out for Joan like he did the other characters. He cast the role based on looks, and then took the character in a different direction than he had originally planned. But I can't help but wonder if the mess with these relationships is a result of those change in plans.
Did I know when I started the show, when I wrote the pilot, that Joan, in that first conversation with Peggy, that Joan would be a single mother, working woman? No. That's all little decisions, just like life, all along the way.
But either way, Joan is still an amazing character. Her good looks can distract from the fact that she's an intelligent and deeply nuanced character. She might be beautiful, but she's not something to be owned. She's a jaguar.
But a woman you can't have, because they have all the qualities of a jaguar. Good looking, expensive, fast, and frankly, not practical.
Please tell me I'll be okay.
I don't know. I wish I was older.
Oh, adults don't know anything, Glenn.
We've examined two women whose stories are about rise and empowerment. Now we'll examine the other side of the female experience in Mad Men. Matt Weiner himself says that Betty, along with Joan and Peggy, represent the three aspects of women in the series. Never mind that he leaves out the other major woman of the show, but we'll talk about her next time.
The flip side there's obviously more than two dimensions to a woman's possible experience, and certainly Betty is the third part of it.
Betty Draper is the first wife of Dawn. She is the quintessential housewife at the beginning of the series. With her blonde hair and beautiful doll-like face, she, along with her husband and two children, represent the picture-perfect ideal of what the American family was supposed to be.
And that girl, Betty. I remember Mona said they looked like they were on top of our wedding cake.
However, like everyone else in this series, Betty is not happy. But before we get into the reasons why, it's important to know what Betty's story is not about. This is not the story of a woman who is forced to be a housewife. It's not the story of a woman who wants a career instead of domestic duties. That's Peggy and Joan's story. Betty is different in that she actively wants to be a housewife and takes pride in it.
Besides getting the handsome prince, are you, an actress or something?
No, I'm a housewife.
Rather, Betty is shaped by her own desires and values. She represents the ideals of 1950s America, believing that a woman's place was at home with the children. Even by the standards of the time, Betty is considered old-fashioned and almost too perfect to exist.
Do people think I'm weak?
No, it's just you're so sweet and perfect.
I'm not.
Well, it does seem that way.
Betty was raised by her parents, Eugene and Ruth Hofstadt. Her mother, Ruth, died young, about 3 months before the first episode. Betty idolizes her late mother, who was very domineering and critical to her. She tries to live her life the way her mother wanted, focusing on her looks and devoting herself to being a wife and mother.
She wanted me to be beautiful so I could find a man. There's nothing wrong with that.
Before the series began, Betty was a model, the ultimate expression of the importance that she places on her beauty. She met Dawn on a photo shoot, and very soon the two were married and moved from the city to Ossining to raise children.
I think I only had 2 more jobs, maybe 3, before we got engaged. And then I got pregnant.
However, Betty isn't really equipped to deal with children. She reacts very negatively to anything they do that displeases or even inconveniences her, and she doesn't take them or their emotional needs seriously. Her parenting even borders on abusive at times.
You have nothing to say.
I didn't do anything.
Don't you dare lie to me. I'll cut your fingers off.
Part of this behavior is of course the fact that Don is an incredibly shitty husband who takes almost no role in raising his children. The burden falls entirely on Betty to be responsible for Sally and Bobby.
Take no responsibility for anything that goes on in this house.
Pay the bills, clothes on your back, the damn stables.
But another reason has to do with Betty's immaturity. Throughout this series, Betty is shown to be incredibly immature for her age.
Mostly, she seems consumed with petty jealousies and overwhelmed with everyday activities. Basically, we're dealing with the emotions of a child here.
She wasn't always like this.
Well, we're finding that this kind of anxiety is not uncommon in housewives.
She's very petty, prone to pouting and acting out when she's frustrated. She even sees a child psychologist for a while.
Dr. Keener.
Call me Dr. Agna. That's what the kids do.
This is part of the reason why she has such a hard time being a parent. She went from being a young woman to being a wife and mother without enough time to develop as her own person. Emotionally, she's still very childlike, and the burden of having to be responsible for another person is overwhelming to her.
I'm here all day, alone with them, outnumbered.
What about Carla? Doesn't she count?
It's not her job to raise our children. I'm here, then you come home and get to be the hero.
It's also why Betty has such a close relationship with Glenn Bishop. A lot of people misinterpret the relationship, viewing it as creepy or sexual in some way. But the reason Betty becomes so close to Glenn is that she feels that she cannot communicate with the adults around her.
Glenn, I can't talk to anyone. It's so horrible.
Later on, she reacts very badly when Sally and Glenn become friends, and forbids Sally from seeing him. On some level, she's jealous that her daughter is stealing her friend from her.
That boy is bad.
No, he's not.
Believe me, I know him better than you do.
You don't know him at all.
However, Betty's immaturity isn't the only reason she's unsatisfied with her life. It's that her picture-perfect life isn't all that great. Despite appearances, Betty is extremely lonely. Not just because Don works all the time, but even when he is there, he's still not emotionally available to her.
I want you so badly.
Don hides his identity as Dick Whitman from Betty, believing that a woman like her would never love the real him. But ironically, this secrecy is why she falls out of love with him. Because he was always hiding from her and the children, he could never be there for them emotionally.
You lied to me every day. I can't trust you. I don't know who you are.
This is why Betty relates so much to Glenn. Glenn's mother, Helen, is a divorcee, and as she works and eventually finds a new relationship, Glenn feels neglected. Despite being an adult, Betty feels the same way about how Don neglects her to focus on his work and his affairs.
The person taking care of him isn't giving him what he needs.
Eventually, Betty decides to take action and leaves Don to marry Henry Francis, a politician she met while she was pregnant. Henry is a much better partner for Betty, being both devoted to her wholeheartedly while at the same time having the emotional maturity that she lacks.
Jesus, Henry, just once could you take my side?
No one's ever on your side, Betty.
However, the fact that she immediately remarries another older, high-functioning man means that Betty ultimately still hasn't grown at all. She's just moved from one marriage to another provider who will take care of her, and is still in the same place that she was with Don. It's why she continues to be unsatisfied in her new marriage, despite how much of a better husband Henry is.
So much change. It's made everything difficult.
Her dissatisfaction is in part a sign of the times that she's living in. As the 60s progress on, the ideal of the housewife begins to get left behind. Women start to find more opportunities in the workforce, and women like her friend Francine, who once scoffed at the idea of a woman working outside the home, has gotten herself a part-time job in order to escape the boredom of domestic life.
As they get older, there's less and less to do. Being alone in the house all that time. I really needed a challenge.
Well, there's still plenty of challenges ahead, believe me.
At the end of the series, Betty finally manages to make a move and try and develop as a person. She goes back to college to get her master's degree in psychology, and the fact that she's continuing her schooling shows that she's finally moving past her childishness and into adulthood. Of course, it's just as she makes this development that tragedy strikes.
It's aggressive, and it's very advanced. I wish there was better news.
Betty's cancer diagnosis can be read a number of ways. It's of course tragic that Betty is the one character that dies from smoking, the thing that we are warned about from the first episode.
My wife hates it. Reader's Digest says it will kill you.
Yeah, I heard about that.
Ladies love their magazines.
Betty is a habitual smoker, of course, so it makes sense. But of all the characters who smoke like there is no tomorrow, it's Betty that actually pays the price.
It's worth saying now that it's over that I always knew that Betty would die, would contract lung cancer.
Another way to look at it is that Betty dies because her era is dying. The 1960s are coming to an end, and with it the end of the values of that era. The future belongs to women like Peggy and Joan, women who want more from life. Betty was stuck in the past, and as she was unable to move into the future, it left her behind.
I don't know. Maybe I'm old-fashioned.
Betty Draper, that is indeed how I would describe you.
But you can also look at her acceptance of her death as a strength. She's comfortable where she is and accepts the reality of her situation with grace. Don had to run to the end of the continent in order to finally face his own problems, and even then might have just traded it in for another advertisement. But Betty faces death with the same strength that she's shown throughout the rest of the show, and if nothing else, that's something to be admired.
And I don't want you to think I'm a quitter. I've fought for plenty in my life. That's how I know when it's over. It's not a weakness.
Zou, zoubi, zou, zoubi, zou. Mon Dieu, que c'est doux. Zoubi, zoubi, zou.
Happy birthday, baby.
Okay, just a heads up. I'm going to be simping hard in this section. Megan is one of my favorite characters in Mad Men, but surprisingly, a lot of fans don't like her, Or at least they don't consider her to be a major part of the show the way that other characters like Betty or Joan are. The consensus seems to be that she was just a passing phase for Dawn, not a true love for him. Even John Hamm seemed to forget about Megan when looking back on the series.
And Don gets to kind of have closure with the three women in his life, and Sally and Peggy and Betty, and it's a real...
Now, I don't agree with this assessment. I think Megan is a critical part of the show, and a character worthy of examination. But I understand why Megan isn't considered as highly as the other major characters, and we'll talk about some of the reasons for that later. But for now, let's take a look at her character.
You know I don't want you to fail.
Good. Because I'm not going to.
Megan Calvé is the second wife of Dawn. She's introduced in Season 4 as one of the new secretaries at Sterling Cooper. Her introduction is actually very sneaky. She's presented as a background character, similar to how we would see other non-important secretaries like Hildy or Allison, which is exactly the point of her character.
Maybe I should have kept her at reception.
Her relationship to Dawn is supposed to be a surprise. During Season 4, Dawn enters into a relationship with Dr. Faye Miller. Faye is basically the perfect partner for Dawn. She's an age-appropriate professional woman who understands people the same way that he does.
I know the holidays are hard in your situation, but don't worry. You'll be married again in a year.
What?
I'm sorry. I always forget. Nobody wants to think they're a type.
However, Faye wants Dawn to confront his identity issues directly and admit to who he really is. This is what Dawn needs to do in order to grow as a person and actually get over his issues instead of running away from them. However, he doesn't want to do that. He wants to keep the comforting lie of Don Draper going, and thus he turns to Megan, who looks at him the way he wants to be seen.
I feel like myself when I'm with you, but the way I always wanted to feel.
There's a reason the episode where Dawn and Megan suddenly and unexpectedly get engaged is called Tomorrowland. If you've never been to Disneyland in California, Tomorrowland is a section of the park dedicated to the idealization of the future. It's what Walt Disney imagined a technology would lead to, a kind of futurist, space-age utopia. Now, we of course know that this idealization didn't end up happening, but their relationship is just like the facade at Disneyland. It's a comforting lie instead of a cold truth.
What about Tomorrowland? I don't want to ride an elephant. I want to fly a jet.
Now, that's not to say that this is the only reason that Dawn falls for Megan. There is a lot to love about this girl. Not only is she stunningly beautiful, she's also an incredibly kind and easygoing person. She's artistic and intelligent, and when we're first introduced to her, she's almost perfect in a way.
Don't be upset. It's just a milkshake. I can grab a straw or some napkins. This is my last dress.
Megan represents the ideals of the 1960s. Up until now, we've only seen the ugly side of the hippie movement. Unwashed bums and drug addicts. But Megan embodies the other side, the free-spirited and artistic idealism of the era. She's not an angry pretender using the movement as an identity. She's just happy and free, which is intoxicating compared to what we've seen of life in the 1960s so far.
Let's be clear. I'm not gonna run out of here crying tomorrow. I just want you right now.
But this free-spiritedness is exactly what starts the decline in her marriage with Dawn. Megan is outgoing and uninhibited, the exact opposite of the closed-off Don Draper. This is what the infamous Zuby Zoo scene is all about. It's not just that Don is embarrassed that all his co-workers, whom he keeps at an arm's length, got to see his wife in a very intimate light. It's that he realized for the first time that he can't control Megan the way that he could Betty.
Don't waste money on things like that.
It was my money, and you don't get to decide what I do with it.
Well, could you please not use it to embarrass me again?
Control is the running theme of their relationship in Season 5 and 6. Don is in a position of power over Megan, both from his age and the fact that he's literally her boss. That's not to say that Megan was coerced or anything, as she's genuinely happy in a relationship. It's just that consciously or not, Don likes the control that he has over her, and as she finds her independence more and more, it fractures their relationship.
Get in the car, eat ice cream, leave work, take off your dress. Yes, master. Don't you dare pull away! I'm talking to you!
After Megan realizes that she wants to be an actress, she quits Sterling Cooper. And Megan's acting career bothers Don. Not just because she has to kiss other men, or the fact that she's no longer at his beck and call, but deeper than that, her rejection of advertising is, at least to Don, a rejection of him as well.
Well, no one's made a stronger stand against advertising than you.
However, there is something we should correct. A lot of people interpret Don cheating on Megan at the end of season 5 as payback for her choosing acting over him. However, I don't see it that way. Megan's mother told Don that all he had to do was wait for Megan to fail becoming an actress, and then she would accept her role as his devoted wife.
Take my advice. Nurse her through this defeat, and you shall have the life you desire.
However, Don chooses to help Megan get her first role instead of keeping her to himself. This act sets her on a course of independence from him, and him going back to his cheating is sort of a way of letting her go. However, this letting go is exactly why I feel that people don't take Megan as seriously as the other female characters. She sort of disappears from the narrative in season 6 as Don is focused on his affair with his neighbor Sylvia. She naively just waits as Don grows increasingly emotionally distant. Her diminished role this season is part of the narrative of Dawn's isolation and decline, but this, along with her storyline next season, are why she doesn't feel as impactful as the other characters.
I don't know where you've gone, but I'm here. I keep trying to make things the way they used to be, but I don't know how.
In season 7, Megan is a struggling actress living in Hollywood. Although Dawn visits her on occasion, it's clear that their relationship is falling apart as they grow ever more distant. Eventually, they just agree to get divorced. Megan only appears in about 6 out of the 14 episodes this season, again contributing to her lack of a presence in the series. And Megan's character arc this season is also another reason why some fans don't like her. Megan goes from a free-spirited and kind person to a bitter, failed actress. She even acts very uncharacteristically when she gets jealous of Stephanie and lies to get her away from Dawn. And while these actions are believable from a plot perspective, it's never felt authentic to me.
It's sunny here for everyone but me. I'm walking around in a cloud of no.
The series has this thing about the way that it portrays certain characters. Harry Crane goes through the same thing, where after he gets involved with Hollywood, he becomes a complete douchebag. And while yes, that does certainly happen in real life, it doesn't feel natural to me. Harry's turn to a heel feels more like an inside joke about Hollywood on the part of the writers, rather than a natural progression of his character. And I feel the same way about Megan. The way that she's presented in her final episode just doesn't feel real to me. Again, it's understandable how everything she went through would make her jaded and cynical, but it felt too simple and forced to me. Peggy went through a lot and changes over the course of the show, but retains a lot of her core innocence and kindness. The same is true of Joan and Betty. But for some reason, Megan alone is portrayed in a really negative light in her last episode, and I don't really understand why.
Why did I believe the things you said to me? Why am I being punished for being young?
However, it's probably due to the fact that Megan was originally supposed to have another storyline in the final season. However, they ended up not doing it for some reason, and this lack of a real resolution to her character is what really hurts her in the eyes of most fans. Just like the rest of the show, Megan's character drew the short end of the stick so that other characters could shine instead.
I thought that Megan was going to have one more story. We had a little thing for her when Dawn was in the California at the end, it was near California. And I realized, and the room told me, they're like, this is Jessica's last episode.
Again, I know I'm simping hard for Megan here. If you know me, you know that I can't help but really feel for characters like her or Adriana from The Sopranos. Innocent characters who really don't deserve the treatment they get from the characters in the show or from the fans in real life.
I'm your wife. Stop pushing me away with both hands.
Of course, just like Adriana, I know there's going to be some of you who think that Megan is not innocent. A lot of fans think that Megan was just a gold digger who used Dawn to fund her life as an actress, an interpretation that's furthered by the fact that characters in-universe think this as well.
She's going to be a failing actress with a rich husband.
However, I don't agree. I don't think there's anything in the show to suggest that Megan had a plan for her relationship with Dawn. Yes, she did seduce him in Chinese Wall, but that seemed to be more for her own attraction than an attempt to lure him into marriage. And as I stated, the marriage coming out of nowhere is the entire point of the episode, and it's just as much a surprise for Megan as it is for us, the audience.
I don't know what to say. This is all so fast.
Megan really was just a nice girl. She was sweet, intelligent, and artistic, living her life freely and without toxicity. She got caught up in the bitter, jaded world of Madison Avenue, and it, along with some poor writing choices, ruined her as a character. But we should remember that at her core, Megan was one of the beautiful girls, in every sense of the word.
No, I think she's good at everything. I think she's just one of those girls.
She's here on a Sunday, and I respect that. But you know she's earning more than all of us.
It must suck to be Bobby Draper, having to constantly live in the shadow of your older sister, both in character and for the actors in real life. The show actually had 8 different actors play the role of Dawn's son, though I doubt anyone could name them off the top of their heads, as compared to Kiernan Shipka, who went on to great success after her time on Mad Men. And though Bobby had a few moments over the years, he will perpetually be overlooked in favor of the only child that the audience really cares about, Sally Draper. Sally is the eldest child of Dawn and Betty. She starts the series off as an innocent 6-year-old girl, but over the course of the show, grows into a young woman who is shaped and scarred by her parents. She serves not only as a reflection of Dawn and Betty, but also a look into the future and where the times are headed. So, let's examine Sally Draper, the mad child.
It doesn't really bother me, except for it's forever. When I think about forever, I get upset.
Sally is born in an interesting time in society. The concept of adolescence was just starting to solidify, and an entire industry of youth-related products was forming. However, the concept of parenting was still fundamentally rooted in the past. Parents still physically punished their children, set bad examples for them to follow, and taught them all the wrong lessons in life.
You're not going to be watching television. You're not going to be playing with your friends. I'm taking away Barbie.
You're mean.
You betcha. Get in there.
However, the biggest mistake that Dawn and Betty make during this time is assuming that their children have no understanding or depth. They view Sally as a simple creature to be placated by a toy or by putting her in front of a television set. However, as we go through this series, we come to understand that Sally has a deep understanding of everything that's going on around her.
She's a child. She'll get over it.
Take the death of her grandfather Eugene. While her parents dismiss her fears of Eugene's ghost coming back in the form of the new baby Jean, what's really going on is her attempting to process the death of one of the only figures in her life who took an active interest in her. She's dealing with the grief alone, as neither of her parents are there for her emotionally.
You're being hysterical. Calm down.
He's dead. He's dead, and he's never coming back. And nobody cares that he's really, really, really gone.
Sally, go watch TV.
And this awareness doesn't stop there. Sally sees how her parents behave and understands their flaws. She knows her mother is childish, prone to jealousy, and fits of outrage when she doesn't get what she wants. And she learns how to placate her to avoid punishment.
She doesn't care what the truth is, as long as I do what she says.
And she knows that her father is a womanizer. She sees the way he interacts with women, both the ones that he's married to and the ones he cheats with. She has to not only deal with the fact that her parents get divorced, but even after accepting her new stepmother, has to see Dawn cheating on her as well. It's not a great example for a male role model to set.
Anyone pays attention to either of you, and they always do. And you just ooze everywhere.
But more than anything, Sally realizes just how little she knows her father. Like everyone else, Don presented a facade to Sally about who he was as a father, loving, strong, and always there for her. But over the years, the cracks began to show, with each bad decision chipping away at their relationship.
Then I realized I don't know anything about you.
I feel like fans of the show like to exaggerate how loving a father Don was to Sally. Yes, they had some cute scenes together over the years, and he obviously has affection for his daughter. But Don is a really terrible father. Not just in a terrible example that he sets for them, but also with just how little attention he paid to them over the years.
This way you see them exactly as much as you do now. On weekends and... Oh wait, Don, when was the last time you saw them?
I'm writing this section during an interesting time in my life. I actually had a daughter of my own during the time that this video was in production, and it has completely changed the way that I looked at Don and Sally's relationship. I understand the 60s were a different time, when men were men and all of that, but I just genuinely can't comprehend being that disinterested in your own progeny.
You want to love them, but you don't. And the fact that you're faking that feeling.
Over the course of the show, Sally goes from longing for her mostly absent father to actively resenting him. When she was young, she could forgive her father for missing her birthday when he brings her a new puppy. But by the time she becomes a teenager, she's realized just how little Don was there for her over the years.
My father's never given me anything.
In the end, Sally has to be the grown-up in the family. She has to take care of her brothers when her mother is diagnosed with cancer. She has to be the one who makes responsible decisions. And she has to take care of herself because no one else will.
I made French toast.
You know, I don't like you using the stove.
Oh, Daddy, I do it all the time.
The series doesn't give us any clues as to what Sally will end up doing. There has always been a desire to have a Sally spin-off, following her into the 70s and 80s when she's an adult. Given the state of spin-offs from other critically acclaimed dramas, I'm glad they never went down that route. But the series does give us a hint on how Sally will turn out. Sally goes through a lot over the course of the show. She starts the series as an innocent child. Later, her parents' constant abuse leads her to becoming a problem child, getting into fights and acting out. She then becomes a rebellious teen, going to a boarding school where she gets into even more trouble in an attempt to fit in.
The good is not beating the bad.
But by the end of the series, Sally has overcome a lot of that and become her own person. She is responsible, thoughtful, and wiser than when she was a little girl. And more than anything, she's trying to be different from her parents.
You know what I'm going to write down for my dream? I want to get on a bus and get away from you and Mom and hopefully be a different person than you two.
Early on, Betty tried to teach Sally about how women of her time should behave, emphasizing physical appearance and trying to find a man. She freaks out whenever Sally has a physical imperfection and tries to instill her antiquated values in her.
And you don't kiss boys, boys kiss you.
However, Sally sees how unhappy her mother's life turned out, and rejects these worldviews. Unlike Betty, who idolizes her late mother and tries to live the way she wanted her to, Sally is more realistic about her mother's flaws and rises above them.
Yeah, I know, because where would Mom be without her perfect nose? She wouldn't find a man like you. She'd be nothing.
Though she and Betty fight throughout most of the series, in the end, Betty comes to appreciate Sally's independence. She's realized that Sally was right about a lot of things, and she knows that her daughter will be alright no matter what happens to her.
Sally, I always worried about you because you marched to the beat of your own drum. But now I know that's good. I know your life will be an adventure.
Of course, we know that escaping the toxic tendencies of your parents isn't easy, and we know that Sally has already inherited some of her parents' problems. She's got a temper like Betty, and has some of her father's impulse control issues. Not to mention the smoking that she's picked up from the two of them.
Hey, I'm your father. You may not
want to listen to this, but you are like your mother and me. You're going to find that out.
But the show gives us hope that Sally can rise above all of that and become a better person than Dawn and Betty. The 60s are coming to an end, and the future is full of possibilities. She's not doomed to just repeat the cycle of her parents. She's her own person, with her own future that she can shape to be whatever she wants.
Life goes on.
So many people.
I feel bad for you.
I don't think about you at all.
Originally, I wasn't planning on covering the side characters of Mad Men. The focus of the show is on the main cast, and the side characters are mostly there to just support their stories. They're likable and interesting for the most part, but it's rare for there to be storylines dedicated to them exclusively. However, I figured it was worth it to briefly go over the most major of the minor characters. They do tend to be some of the fan favorites, and some of them do have interesting tidbits. So in this section, let's examine the side characters of Mad Men.
Look, Pete, there's a group of us. We're all coming up together.
Let's start off with the main side characters we see in the early seasons, Pete's goons. Seriously, Ken, Harry, and Paul were originally just sidekicks for Pete in the pilot. Paul was actually named Dick in the original draft, which is weird considering there was also another character named Dick Whitman.
And, these guys, these characters were not very well defined. They were literally called Ken, Dick, and Harry. And they were Pete's sort of, guys.
It should be no surprise, then, that Paul is the least developed of the Three Stooges. He's a copywriter in the first 3 seasons, and a pretty terrible one at that. His only notable idea was the Jackie and Marilyn pitch for Playtex, which, while a great idea, never ended up being used. He eventually gets left behind in favor of Peggy when they open up a new agency.
Damn it.
Paul's only character detail is being a phony hippie. Despite trying to pass himself off like a guy from the village, he's a rich kid who went to Princeton. He makes a big show out of hanging around black people and even dating a black girl in a time of rampant racism. However, the series makes it clear that he's only doing it because it makes him seem cool, and when push comes to shove, he's actually using black people as a prop.
Fallen in love with that girl just to show how interesting you are. Go ahead, what part is wrong?
What's funny is that Paul was previously in a relationship with Joan, which would have been an interesting element to explore. But just like with Roger, Joan's relationships aren't explored, and it ends up being a detail that goes nowhere. Instead, Paul is written out of the show, and only comes back for a single episode as a Hare Krishna member, which happens to be one of the only Harry Crane-focused episodes as well. Now, I already talked about Harry's character arc in the Megan section. He goes from being the only nice guy in accounts to being a Hollywood scumbag. But I don't really buy this transformation for 2 reasons. One, there's nothing to suggest that Harry is secretly a scumbag or has scumbag tendencies before this. Like, he gets drunk and cheats on his wife, but he actually confesses to her and sleeps in his office until she forgives him. It would be more believable if he didn't confess, and this first infidelity was the stepping stone to his moral decline. But as it sits right now, there's really nothing to suggest why Harry became a total creep later on.
God, she is all kinds of trouble, isn't she?
Everything turns you on, doesn't it?
And the other reason I don't find this transformation authentic is because it happens mostly off screen. Again, we don't really follow Harry as a standalone character, only as part of other characters' storylines. So when he suddenly becomes a douchebag, it feels like it's coming out of nowhere.
Hello. Eager homosexual Canadian sex bot and unaccompanied redhead. This may be my key demographic.
Now, let's talk about Ken Cosgrove. Of the 3 characters, Ken is by far the most developed. He actually has plot lines about him, and he returns from his break at the end of the 3rd season and rejoins Sterling Cooper. However, Ken kinda has the opposite problem of Harry Crane, in that he becomes unexpectedly likable out of nowhere. Of the three sidekicks, Ken is originally the most sexist and quite frankly rapey out of the bunch. We see him do way more outrageous things than even Pete does, but the series never really calls him out on this behavior.
Campbell, you sucker punched me. What is wrong with you?
Now, you could say that this is meant to reflect the theme that good-looking people get away with more stuff. The series makes it a point that people like Pete way less than guys like Dawn or Ken simply because they are more handsome and suave than he is. Maybe the fact that Ken is never treated as an awful person, despite his terrible behavior, is just another example of this dynamic.
You are excellent at making the clients feel their needs are being met, but Mr. Cosgrove has the rare gift of making them feel as if they haven't any needs.
However, I think it has more so to do with the fact that they made Ken a writer. People like Matt Weiner tend to idolize book writers and look down on Hollywood types. See, Ken is a novelist, so he's sympathetic. Harry is a Hollywood producer type, so he's a douchebag. I really can't help but wonder how much of the writer's biases affected the direction of these characters.
Save the fiction for your stories.
Now, let's talk about Sal Romano, the art director of Sterling Cooper. Unlike a lot of the other side characters, Sal actually does have a storyline that exists outside of his relationship to the main cast. Sal is a closeted gay man, putting on a front of interest in women and hiding his true nature. He does this because he feels, rightly so, that he would never be accepted if he was openly gay. In Season 3, Lee Garner Jr., who's also secretly gay, comes on to Sal. When Sal rejects him, Lee uses his position as Sterling Cooper's biggest client to have him fired in revenge. Lee is a petty, vindictive creep, so that completely tracks.
Put it on, Roger.
Come on.
Put it on.
What doesn't track is why we never see Sal again. He's written off the show entirely, and we never get another appearance from him for the rest of the series. Now, some people defend this, saying that just like in real life, sometimes people leave and you never see them again. But that's neglecting the fact that we do see most of the side characters return at some point. Ken gets written back into the show, and even Paul gets an episode to himself. But nothing for poor old Sal.
You people.
What do you mean, you people? Oh. Nice.
There are rumors that something happened between actor Brian Batt and Matt Weiner, and that's why he was written off the show. And while I can certainly understand why people would believe that, given Matt Weiner's history, as far as I can tell, those are just rumors. But I do wonder if it had something to do with Sal being gay. The show is a little weird in how it writes gay characters. It doesn't shy away from showing them, but it also never gives them a resolution. Sal is never given a resolution, Joan's lesbian roommate is never brought up again, Joyce is eventually written off, although in that case it was due to a personal conflict with Matt Weiner. Even Bob Benson never gets to come to terms with his sexuality before he's written off as well.
Bob, you shouldn't be with a woman.
But as much as it's going to disappoint some of you, I'm not really going to talk about Bob Benson. Mainly because I think he's a pointless character. A prominent character for sure, and a funny one too, but I just don't think that he pays off in a meaningful way. He feels like a composite of all the tropes from the other characters. He's got a secret identity like Dawn. He's in the closet like Sal. He's an ass-kissed like Pete. He kinda just shows up one day and is suddenly the most important side character in the story. He enters into a faux relationship with Joan, but she rejects his marriage proposal and he leaves for Detroit. Again, no payoff to anything they set up with him. Is the fact that he's hiding his identity like Dawn going to blow up in his face one day? I really don't know, because the show never told us.
Not great, Bob!
Next, let's talk about Michael Ginsberg. Introduced in Season 5, he's a copywriter known for both his genius and his eccentric personality. Ginsberg is, well, he's Woody Allen. Seriously, Matt Weiner wrote him to be a Woody Allen type, which was starting to emerge in this era.
Yeah, there's a touch of, there's a harbinger, we talked about this a little bit before, but for me, a sense of the kind of male Jewish leading character who was going to become more common in the 70s.
Ginsberg was also written to reflect a certain aspect of Jewish identity. Now, Matt Weiner himself is Jewish, and we see a lot of that identity reflected in the show. In fact, Michael has a line talking about his identity as a Martian, and it's a clear tongue-in-cheek reference to Jewish conspiracy theories.
Don't worry, there's no plot to take over Earth. We're just displaced.
However, as funny as Ginsburg is, he's also an extremely tragic character. He was born in a concentration camp during the Holocaust, and was later adopted and brought to New York as a baby after his parents died. Though Ginsburg is treated as a funny, eccentric guy most of the time, it becomes clear that he's also dealing with some serious mental health issues that arose from this upbringing. The computer being the thing that sets off his psychosis might seem like science fiction, but it's actually connected back to the Holocaust. Not only does Ginsburg worry about this machine erasing people's identities, but IBM itself was allegedly involved with the Holocaust as well. While the whole nipple incident is a wild turn of events for his characters, we shouldn't forget that it represents deep generational trauma that never fully healed.
Get out while you can!
But now let's talk about the greatest of the minor characters, Bert Cooper. Bert is the co-owner of Sterling Cooper, having founded the company with Roger's father sometime before the Great Depression of the 1920s. By the time of the series, Bert is largely detached from the everyday operations of the company, focusing his time instead on high-level deals like the Nixon campaign, and becoming one of America's first-generation weeaboos.
What a delightful custom from the Far East, I assume.
Japan.
I feel like people don't really understand Bert as a character. They tend to view him as a kindly old mentor figure, helped of course by the fact that he's played by the lovable Robert Morse. They even go so far as to give Bert this musical send-off after his death, which honestly doesn't really fit his character. In reality, Bert is not a kindly old man, but actually an extremely ruthless and cutthroat business magnate.
Bert Cooper is a dark character. I heard someone describe him as like gentle or something. That guy is like a titan of industry who like worships Ayn Rand and is like, you know, what does he say? Kill or be killed, eat or be eaten. That's how I was raised. I mean, you know what I mean? He's a hardcore like mid-century like American titan of industry, Republican. You know, would have gravitated into anything that preserves. I guess he's sort of libertarian, but he's really fascist. He's a fascist.
Overall, I really like the portrayal of Bert. He's like Carnegie or Rockefeller post-retirement, a titan of industry who's now too old to be overtly threatening. He comes off like your beloved grandpa most of the time, but every now and again, you see the vaguely racist capitalist underneath, like when he defends Don against Pete, only to later use that information to blackmail him into signing the contract.
Then sign. After all, when it comes down to it, who's really signing this contract anyway?
But that's it for the major side characters. And now that we're getting towards the end of this analysis, it's time to talk about the most important person in Mad Men history. Not that he would ever let you forget that.
You know, every time I get an award, I always wonder, like, what act of accidental hubris is going to be thrown at me on this, you know?
Alright, so if you've been paying attention every time I mention Matt Weiner throughout this retrospective, you might have gotten some hints on how I feel about the guy. But this isn't like the situation I was in with David Simon. For one thing, I don't believe there's someone else who secretly deserves more credit for Mad Men than Matt. And for another, he never called me fucknuts on Twitter. I respect Matt a lot. He created what is, in my opinion, the third best show in television history, and the true successor to The Sopranos. But I do have some problems with the guy, and I'm not the only one. So, in this section, let's talk about the difficult man behind Mad Men, Matt Weiner.
It's infuriating to be misunderstood and to have things be misunderstood based on a misquote. There's a lot of that kind of stuff where you're just like, leave the show alone. Let the people watch the show. No one cares what you think. And then some of it, you're like, I want the audience to be involved. I want them to write about it. I want them to think about it. They can be in the town hall.
Matthew Weiner was born in 1965 in Baltimore, although his family moved to Los Angeles and that's where he grew up. His father was a medical researcher at the University of Southern California, and Matt would later get an MFA in cinema and television there as well. His first jobs in the industry would be on sitcoms like Becker. While working there, he wrote the pilot of Mad Men as a spec script, hoping to eventually get it made into a show. When no studio was interested in developing it as a series, it landed him a job on The Sopranos when David Chase read it. Matt would join the show during the 5th season and quickly became one of the most important writers alongside Terrence Winter. He wrote or co-wrote 12 episodes of the series, including Emmy-nominated episodes like Unidentified Black Males and Kennedy and Heidi. He also had a cameo appearance as a mob expert named Manny Sapphire. After The Sopranos ended, David Chase encouraged HBO to produce Matt's spec script as their next series.
It got me my job on The Sopranos about 2 years later, and that literally within a month, days of being there, David Chase sent it to HBO with a note on the top of it that said, "This should be your show after The Sopranos is over."
However, HBO passed on the series. In fact, they never even responded to the pitch. Now, there has been a lot of speculation as to why they passed, and it might be as simple as the fact that they just didn't think it was a good idea. They also passed on Breaking Bad a little while after this. But it's been long speculated that it might have had something to do with Matt himself. Matt wasn't a well-liked guy on The Sopranos set. He was a kiss-ass to people above him like David Chase, while being a condescending prick to anyone below him, and he had a tendency to take up all the air in the room. He was so disliked, in fact, that Henry Bronchtein, one of the executive producers on The Sopranos, actually left him behind on location after one of their shoots. It's been speculated that the reason Carolyn Strauss, president of HBO at the time, declined on Mad Men was because she never wanted to work with Matt again.
And that was the last I heard from HBO.
Mad Men would eventually find a home on AMC, previously a movie network that was making their first foray into original programming. Mad Men was the first series they did, which gave Matt unprecedented power to do his series exactly as he saw fit. They had no experience in making shows or expectations of ratings given the fact that this was their first series. So they basically let Matt do whatever he wanted. No other writer in history would have the kind of power Matt did, and it let Mad Men breathe in a way that few series get to.
I basically, from the beginning of the show, the network had never made a show before, and it's how do I explain this? Basically, there was a power vacuum, and I sucked up all the power.
The end result was a slow but spectacularly written series. While not the biggest show ever in terms of ratings, Mad Men quickly became a hit among critics, earning 6 Emmys, 2 Golden Globes, and many other awards for their first season alone. AMC had on their hands a show that could compete with the quality of HBO, and it was what helped launch them into becoming a premium brand. However, while Mad Men might have been a critical darling, it was quickly overshadowed by AMC's second child, Breaking Bad. Premiering just 1 year later, Breaking Bad had the same great character writing like Mad Men, but with actual exciting plots as well. It quickly became the hotter show, and while both series would eventually pale in comparison to the money-printing machine that is The Walking Dead, it was clear that Mad Men would be an award winner, but not a ratings winner for AMC.
John Hamm of Mad Men fame, terrific actor, has said, he's gone on record, he says he will kick your ass if you win again. That's what John Hamm says. Do you fear for your life now?
You know what? He said that after my second one. And he did,
And then you won a third.
And then I won a third.
And what did he do?
Nothing. He did nothing, I was going to tell you.
However, while Mad Men was being praised, behind the scenes there were some problems. Let's just get this out of the way. Matt Weiner is an attention hog. He loves to hear himself talk. Watch any interview with the guy that includes other people, and he just takes up all the air. Even Terrence Winter, his coworker and friend on The Sopranos, said that he could be a bit much. And while this would normally be just a little annoying, it actually had serious consequences for the people who worked with him. Matt had a tendency, especially as Mad Men went on, to put his name on almost every single script. This is not industry practice, according to this roundtable interview with him, Vince Gilligan, and David Milch. Not only is this incredibly vain, considering his name is already on the entire show, but there were also monetary consequences to being credited as a writer for all these episodes.
The other part of that is there was a real financial piece of that. That for writers who were for hire, who weren't going to be necessarily, who were, it meant there was, I don't know what the specifics are, but there was back-end money involved.
However, even setting the money aside, the other problem with Matt hogging all the attention for the show was the fact that the writers of Mad Men never got to shine the way he did on The Sopranos. David Chase, for all his faults, let people like Matt and Terrence Winter get attention for their work. So much so, in fact, that they each got to develop their own show later on. I had a whole section of my Wire retrospective dedicated to the writers of that show, because they actually had stories that could be told. But for Mad Men, I really couldn't find much information on the writers. They really didn't get to do anything huge after Mad Men, which I'm not saying is entirely on Matt. However, I do wonder if Matt hadn't stolen all the attention for himself, would they have been given the same opportunity he was after The Sopranos?
It's your job! I give you money, you give me ideas.
And you never say thank you!
That's what the money is for! You're young, you will get your recognition. And honestly, it is absolutely ridiculous to be 2 years into your career and counting your ideas.
However, there is one writer from the Mad Men room who has a story that needs to be told. Cater Gordon. Cater was a writer on the show during the second and third seasons, and co-wrote the season 2 finale, Meditations in an Emergency, for which she and Matt Weiner would win an Emmy. However, 3 weeks after winning, Cater was fired from the show. Years later, during the Me Too movement, Cater revealed that she had been sexually harassed by Matt Weiner, who had one night told her that she owed it to him to see her naked. It's not clear if her firing was a result of her refusal to do so, or if Matt just didn't like sharing an Emmy with someone else. Either way, she never made a formal complaint for fear of her career, but fellow writer and producer Marty Nixon voiced her support for Cater's claim, calling Matt Weiner an emotional terrorist. Now, I don't know the truth about these claims. Matt himself says that he doesn't remember ever saying that. But we can't just ignore it, not only because it's a horrible thing for a boss to do to their employee, but because the situation seems to have influenced Matt's future work. We'll circle back to that soon.
The allegation is not true, and that this is a very important topic, and a topic that I have devoted, that has been an obsession of mine in my work and in my life.
It's also not the only example of Matt Weiner treating his employees like shit. Zosia Mamet, who played Joyce on the show, wrote an essay on why she quit Mad Men, citing the way Matt treated her on set. And this is not the only example of Matt mistreating an actor. It's interesting how few actors from The Sopranos ended up on Mad Men, as opposed to Terrence Winter's show, Boardwalk Empire, which featured a ton of Sopranos alumni. I can't help but wonder if the way that Matt treated them was the reason for this.
Nobody that I really knew would come in to read. Even people that I had relationships with previously, sort of. And they also didn't want to be in it, and they would suddenly be available or unavailable or all the bullshit. You know, I don't want to do TV right now, and then they get cast in another show. Yeah. And, you know, I don't need to sit here 7 years later and, like, keep score of who was an idiot and who I, you know. I'm a bigger person.
After Mad Men ended, Matt wrote and directed his first feature film, Are You Here? It's a comedy drama that stars Owen Wilson, Zach Galifianakis, and Amy Poehler. It centers around a stoner weatherman and his bipolar friend who inherits a farm from his deceased father. The film is not good. It has a 6% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is a crazy number from the guy who created one of the best shows of all time. The movie is supposed to be a subversion of the typical buddy stoner movies. Instead of two underachieving but lovable rascals, it's about a sociopathic drug addict and his mentally ill friend. However, it's shot and played like a typical Owen Wilson movie. The end result is this uncomfortably weird tone, where it's not really dramatic and it's also not really funny. If you listen to Matt talk about the movie, you can sort of get what he's going for. But just like the waitress storyline in Season 7, audiences just weren't feeling this one. A swing and a miss for sure, but one he could potentially recover from.
Was he even competent when he wrote this?
Your father was quite lucid.
I'm sorry, my suit was really itchy.
So I'm not mentioned in there at all?
His next project was a series for Amazon Prime called The Romanovs. Now, despite what the honestly in poor taste intro would have you believe, it's not a historic drama about the royal family of Russia, which would have been cool. Instead, it's an anthology series about different people who believe they are descendants of the Romanov family. The show is, well, how do I say this? Holy shit. If you think Mad Men is a slow, self-indulgent series, boy, you have no idea how far up his own ass Matt Weiner can go. It's a show about boring rich white people dealing with boring rich white people problems. And yeah, you can say that about Mad Men as well, but at least with Mad Men, you had an entire series to connect with the characters. Every episode of the Romanovs is self-contained, which means that you don't even get a chance to bond with the rest of the characters. Anthologies are better for shows like Black Mirror, where the premise is interesting enough to sustain interest in the series. But this show just isn't interesting. The whole Romanov premise isn't even an important part of the series. Nothing about any of these people connect back to the royal family or to each other. It's just a framing device to explore the most boring characters you can possibly imagine.
My experience with Matt was great. I understand that isn't the case for everybody, but for me it was great.
However, here is where we circle back to the Cater Gordon claims. The episode Brighton High Circle is about a piano instructor who is accused of inappropriate behavior by one of his students. However, it turns out the whole thing was just a false accusation, and the point of the episode is that you shouldn't just believe someone when they accuse another person of sexual harassment. Yeah, real subtle there, Matt.
Now, bearing false witness is the worst crime that you can commit. Otherwise, anyone can say anything about anybody. And just saying it ruins their life.
And that's pretty much where Matt's career is at today. He's had some other projects in the works, but nothing's materialized yet. He wrote a book called Heather the Totality. It's about rich white people dealing with boring situations again. I read the free sample on Amazon, and I don't know, I'm just not feeling it. I loved David Simon's books Homicide and The Corner, but honestly at this point, I just can't be bothered to spend any more time with Matt's work. It seems like he used up all of his creative genius, making Mad Men as entertaining as it was, and all that was left afterwards was the boring self-indulgent stuff. So, what can we conclude about Matt Weiner? He's obviously an incredible writer. He created one of the greatest television shows of all time. But he's also an attention hog, an abusive boss, and potentially even worse than that. I'm still incredibly appreciative of what he gave us, but it's hard to love the guy. Despite what he might think of himself, he is not Donald Draper. He's Pete Campbell if he could actually write.
And then I come to this place and you people tell me that I'm good with people, which is strange, because I'd never heard that before.
You're on top and you don't have enough. You're happy because you're successful, for now. But what is happiness? It's a moment before you need more happiness.
Lucky strike. It's toasted. Seriously, I went out and got this just for this bit. I don't even smoke anymore, but that's how committed I am to the Mad Men lifestyle. That's why I'm wearing this suit right now. And that's why I wanted to take time to thank all of you guys for watching this video. Now, I know this project has been a long time coming. I actually started it back in 2024, but I didn't get around to really finishing it and starting serious work on it until 2025. So appreciate you guys sticking with me all this time. And that does sort of reflect my feelings about Mad Men. You know, on one level, I think Mad Men is one of the strongest shows in television history. I think the writing is incredible. I think it has some of the best characters ever. I've said this before, and I know it's a controversial take, but I actually think Donald Draper is a better, more well-written character than even someone like Tony Soprano. That's, of course, because Matt Weiner learned from David Chase, but even still, he is the most complicated character in all of television history for me, bar none. And I really respect the show for all that it accomplished. But it's also hard to deny that Mad Men can at times be a very boring show. It doesn't grab me in the same way that something like The Wire did, where I wanted to, you know, cover all of it, all the topics, all the plots, all the themes, all that kind of stuff. Mad Men, despite being a very expansive show in its own right, is a lot more limited than something like The Wire. It's really just focused on these core characters. Even the side characters don't get the same kind of attention that something like The Wire gives theirs. But even still, it was a project for me that was worthy of a long-form retrospective like this. I do really love this format. I really love digging into a topic over a long period of time with a lot of different topics within the video. So I appreciate you guys watching all this. I know it was a long one, but hopefully you guys enjoyed it. I made it entertaining for you. We will continue to do more long-form retrospectives like this in the future. Now, I know I wasn't thanking the patrons at the end of all of these videos. That's just because they get unlisted once this final project is completed. But now that we're at the end here, I did want to take the time to thank all the patrons who made this videos possible. So we have Matt Joyce, Obstacle Racing Media, Celery Man, Sam Cedarland, Uncle Mike, Cheshire, Brandon Taylor, James Johnson, Wolfgang, No Name, Cool Cookie, River, Judd Usable, Dylan Underwood, and Nearby Couch. I know not all of you guys are capos on the Patreon, but I want to thank you all because no matter what your contributions, you help make projects like this possible. So thank you so much. Again, thank you to the audience for watching this video, for subscribing, for commenting, for offering your support for the channel. You really make me love doing this. I love interacting with the community. We have a really incredible community here of people who just love quality television shows like Mad Men, Sopranos, Deadwood, all that type of stuff. So here's to you guys. Enjoy a cigarette, or don't, because you know they're not that great for you. But either way, thank you so much, and I'll talk to you soon.